This video is brought to you by CoolStuffInc.com, the best online retailer for Magic the Gathering singles and sealed product, and GatheringMagic.com, the #1 source for Magic the Gathering news and content.
Hi, I'm Uriah Oxford from the CMDR Decks YouTube channel. I wanted to let you know before this video starts that this coming weekend, January 2nd through the 4th, 2015, I'll be at Grand Prix Denver. If you want to come out, have some fun, play some EDH, get some deck techs filmed, I would be happy to do so. Just come find me. That's this coming weekend, Grand Prix Denver. I'll see you there. Alright, so let's get into today's deck tech. This is my Nicol Bolas Planeswalker Commander deck. So before I get into the meat of the deck tech, I'd like to ask anyone that I play with locally to go ahead and just turn the video off right now. Nicol Bolas is horrible and there's nothing you can learn in this deck tech that's going to help you beat him. Okay, great. So, Nicol Bolas Planeswalker, well, although technically not legal as a commander, is a very fun deck. There are some people that don't like proxies. I recently received this proxy of Nicol Bolas. If people don't like proxies, that's fine. I have the regular version of Nicol Bolas as well. Now, there are people out there that don't want to play with the non-legendary or the non-commander Planeswalkers as commanders. I understand that. If you want to follow the rules, that's cool. So, if I ever play against someone that doesn't want me using Nicol Bolas Planeswalker as my commander, I do have Nicol Bolas Creature in the deck as well, so I can go ahead and play him instead of Nicol Bolas. It doesn't really affect the deck all that much, because although Nicol Bolas is great, he costs a ton. He can usually get off 1, maybe 2 activations before he gets killed, and then he costs 10, and then 12, and so on and so forth. So although he has, a pretty decent impact once he hits the board, he doesn't tend to stick around all that often, so it's not a huge detriment to the deck if he's not in there. Nicol Bolas Planeswalker destroys non-creatures, gains control of creatures, and his ultimate is pretty much a game winner. There are only 3 creatures in the deck, the original Nicol Bolas being one of them, because you can't really have Nicol Bolas without having Nicol Bolas. So, it's Nicol Bolas. Alright, I don't want to say linchpin of the deck, but the easiest way to win with this deck is with the Chain Veil. As you will see, this is a Super Friends Grixis deck. I crammed a lot of the blue, black, and red Planeswalkers in here because Planeswalkers are extremely powerful, and if you can blank some of your opponent's cards, like having no creatures or few creatures, so their creature removal doesn't do anything, you can then go ahead and play your own creature removal, wipe the board, and just sit there with Planeswalkers and dominate. If I get the Chain Veil in play, there's a very good chance I'm going to win the game. Hey, using extra activations on Planeswalkers is good. Using them multiple times by untapping the Chain Veil is broken. The first clause of the Chain Veil, losing life if I don't activate a Planeswalker's ability, doesn't usually come into play. Maybe I might play this down early if I expect to drop a lot of Planeswalkers soon. I might lose some life, but usually that's not a factor and has never affected my life total in a meaningful way. So the best Planeswalker to use with the Chain Veil, which is arguably the best card in the deck, is Tezzeret the Seeker. He can untap it. He can also search for it. Usually you want to have him go up in loyalty before he actually tutors for the Chain Veil, or else he dies right away. But Tezzeret is ridiculous with the Chain Veil. If you have Tezzeret and a mana rock that makes 3 mana and 1 land, that is an activation for pretty much every 1 land that you have on your Planeswalkers in a turn, which can go really crazy really quickly. So Tezzeret is probably the second kill on site, right behind the Chain Veil. Another Planeswalker that works really good with the Chain Veil is Ral Zarek, because his +1 is tap target permanent, then untap another target permanent. It doesn't matter what you're tapping as long as you're untapping the Chain Veil, and once you can get enough activations of the Chain Veil going, he can go to 7 pretty quickly, or even 8, then ultimate, You can get, hopefully, at least 2 to 3 extra turns, and then if you can't go off and combo and kill someone out with your Planeswalkers in the first turn, you can use those extra turns to go crazy. The only other extra turn card I have in this deck is Temporal Mastery, so there aren't a ton of extra turn effects, but really, Ral Zarek is probably the only one you need, and again, he combos great with the Chain Veil. I hardly ever use his -2. A recent new addition, Teferi Temporal Archmage, the new legal as a commander Teferi. It's really good. I had a game the other night where I had 4 mana rocks in play, which could net me 11 mana. So if I used his -1, I could untap up to 4 permanents, add a bunch of mana. If I had a Chain Veil open, use some of that mana, activate Chain Veil. Now you're thinking, well, yeah, you can only untap Chain Veil as part of your 4 permanents 5 times once you play him before Teferi's gone. Well, if you can net enough mana off of your artifacts with your extra Chain Veil activations, you can actually go ahead and plus him to keep him out of that losing complete loyalty area. I've never done the -10. He is still rather new to the deck because he just came out a short while ago. That's initially the reason I put him in here. But the synergy to untap Chain Veil with Teferi is also another great option that works really well in this ridiculous deck. Alright, so let's go on to the Planeswalkers that don't actually break the Chain Veil. We have Chandra, Pyromaster. Rarely I will go +1 on her. I almost never go -7 because there aren't that many good instants or sorceries in my deck that I would want to cast 3 times. Usually I'm just sitting there on 4 and getting the extra card off of her. Most of the time it's a land, so I'll just be hitting extra land drops. I also have Chandra Nalaar. This is the one that is going to be ticked up. I've never ultimated her yet because I haven't needed to. Usually it's just go up and ping or go down and kill a creature that's going to be a big threat for me right off the bat. 2 of the Lilianas. I have Liliana of the Dark Realms. She's great, and she actually works really well if you can ultimate her for an emblem along with the Chain Veil. Because if you can go ahead and get the untap effect on a swamp, 1 swamp is enough to activate the Chain Veil cost. So her ultimate goes very well in doing so. Usually it's just take up, get a swamp, take up, get a swamp. Occasionally neg 3, but she's usually just a swamp grabber. Liliana Vess is next, usually just as a tutor. Occasionally I'll do the +1. I've never ultimated her in this deck. Usually it's just the ability to go tutor something that I need. A couple of Jaces. We have Jace the Mind Sculptor. Brainstorming is pretty good. Don't have a ton of fetches or a way to shuffle on this deck, so it's not super great, but it's just Jace, so he's good all around pretty much. We also have Jace, Architect of Thought. This will help keep creatures off my back a little bit, and then also just some more card draw there as well. His ultimate is pretty good, especially if you can ultimate him a couple of times in a turn, which I've done, because again, yeah, the Chain Veil can go pretty nuts. Dack Fayden here, usually just do the +1 to go ahead and filter and loot through some cards. The neg 2 to gain control of a target artifact is good. I've never activated it before because I've never seen an artifact that was that amazing while he was on the board. I needed to grab it. But he is somewhat of a new addition. I only got him a couple of months ago. I've never actually ultimated him. Even though he drops pretty early and can go up quickly, relatively quickly, he does tend to be a bit of a target, and people go after him if there's nothing else to go after in the early game. Ashiok Nightmare Reader is a great card with the Chain Veil. You can easily get to 10 to go ahead and exile cards from an opponent's hand and graveyard, or all opponents' hands and graveyard. She's great. She comes early, she goes to 5, goes to 7, goes to 9. So very quickly she can get bigger than most creatures can deal with her in the early game. Just ripped a Sarkhan the Dragon Speaker the other day. I've had him in here for 1 game so far. He wasn't great, but I'm just trying him out for now. He fits the Super Friends theme of the deck. So there we go. Tamiyo, Moon Sage, can tap permanents that don't untap, draw cards. I have not yet got to the point where I have ultimated her and won the game that way because I always win the game before that. Usually it's just tap down a permanent that's going to be an issue for me, or if I'm really in a pinch, go down and -2 to draw a bunch of cards, see if I can find something that's going to help me win the game. Sorin Markov, his -3, put an opponent at 10 life is great. I have done the Mindslaver with him as well, and just ticking up to do 2 damage to target creature or player, it's helpful. He is a bit expensive at 6, coming in only at 4 loyalty, but he fits with the deck pretty well, just pinging the small dudes or hitting someone's life total and gaining me some life until I can start draining people for big. Karn Liberated is great, especially if you can activate him multiple times in a turn. He doesn't last long when you start negating him, but if you go up a few times and then start negating him, he's a beast. So those are all the Planeswalkers of the deck. We get into the tutors, pretty basic. I have Demonic Tutor and Mystical Tutor. Some card draw, because I want to draw into these Planeswalkers. We have Ancestral Vision, Rhystic Study, Arena, Blue Sun Zenith. This is a bit of a problem with the triple blue to cast sometimes, even though I have a lot of non-basic lands in the deck that can produce me a lot of blue mana eventually. Sometimes I'll get stuck with only maybe 1 or 2 blue in the early game, and so that can be an issue. If I was gonna cut a card, this would probably be the next one to be cut, just because that triple blue is kind of a pain. We have Wheel of Fortune, just to go ahead and draw some more cards if I have nothing in hand, or if I need to search for an important piece of the deck. Scroll Rack, which lets me put back the stuff I don't want and see if I can find something I do. Rings of Brighthearth used to be, I think, probably the best card with Planeswalkers. Now that's completely dwarfed by the Chain Veil. Yes, it only costs half of the Chain Veil activation, but you only get it for 1, and it doesn't add loyalty counters, which is a big part of this too. So Rings, it's still in the deck because it's good. It's just not as good as Chain Veil. Other stuff that's beneficial for my Planeswalkers, I have both of the Contagion artifacts in Contagion Clasp and Contagion Engine. This also helps keep down my opponent's creatures, which is very important. Another proliferate spell in Inexorable Tide. The problem with this is when I cast a spell I proliferate, so I can't get proliferate onto a Planeswalker I'm casting because it's still on the stack. So usually you have to have the Planeswalkers in play before it really starts being really good. But it's in there just because so far it's proven to be alright, pretty good. So the next part is the last 2 creatures I have in the deck. When initially we started playing Planeswalkers, it was with a group here that I play with. It was just a test before the Planeswalkers as Commanders came out, just to see how they do. And we were all going to play Commanders against each other, or Planeswalkers as Commanders against each other all of the time. So there is a definite heavy anti-Planeswalker theme towards this deck. First card is Hex Parasite. Removing the counters for an X and 2 life is very good, especially on a 1-drop. Also, Vampire Hexmage, sack it, kill a Planeswalker. That's good as well. I wanted to try to fit cards in here that would return these 2 creatures. Didn't actually end up working out though, because there's so few creatures in the deck. It's not valuable enough for me to use other slots to try to get these back when I'm not going to see them that often. Another card that is certainly anti-Planeswalker is Dreadbore, also Hero's Downfall. Chaos Warp is great to put a Planeswalker into someone's deck, have them shuffle up, and hopefully never draw it again, just like you would if they're playing a legendary creature that's going to be a pain as well. Hinder, pretty much the same thing, just counter it instead of shuffling it in and warping it. Disc is great because it doesn't touch Planeswalkers, it only destroys creatures, enchantments, and artifacts, so it's a great board wipe to help you stabilize and keep your Planeswalkers in play. In Garruk's Wake is another great card that's going to keep all your Planeswalkers in play, but destroy all opposing creatures and Planeswalkers. 9 is a bit much, but we are playing Bolas as our commander, and he costs 8, so it's only 1 more than that. It is certainly doable in this deck. Damnation, go ahead and kill off all those creatures that are threatening your Planeswalkers over and over. Life's Finale, another Wrath in black. This one can put creatures in the yard as well, which can sometimes be useful. Evacuation, keeping those creatures away. As you see, there is a theme. Cyclonic Rift. Actually, I don't know. I think I'd probably cut Cyclonic Rift before I cut Blue Sun Zenith, just because Cyclonic Rift is that, win more card. And with all these Planeswalkers, I'm probably good enough without rifting the board to just go ahead and win once I have the Chain Veil. So if I found another card I'd want to put in here, I'd think Rift might be the first cut. Creatures are a hassle for the deck, so let's go ahead and put Torpor Orb in because none of my creatures trigger on come into play abilities, and I have so few of them anyway, it doesn't really matter. And this can definitely be a thorn in the side of a lot of decks. When I play it, I tend to see an increase in the damage coming my way just because people either want to kill me or try to kill the orb. Mimic Vat, because sometimes there are going to be some good creatures. I'm not going to have the Torpor Orb in play that have some really great come into play effects, so I can go ahead and put them under the Vat, get their abilities, and enjoy it. Force of Will, a couple of counter spells in here, the free ones, so Force and Pact of Negation. Painful Quandary is another thorn in the side of my opponent's card, just like the Torpor Orb. When it sees play, man, people go after you quick. I don't really see this card played as much, but it is definitely one that gains a lot of hate when someone plays it. Yeah, 5 life or discarding a card, not small chunks, especially for just 5 mana. Cruel Ultimatum is in here because of flavor reasons. Tend not to be that great for me because I probably am not going to have a creature card in my yard when I cast this spell, so it's only going to be the draw 3 of the gain 5 and then have someone else, have the negative side effects of it. It can also be a bit difficult to cast, but once we get to 7, usually I can go ahead and hit the triple black, double red, double blue. Croesus's Charm from Plane Shift. Just some great utility. Return a permanent to the owner's hand, destroy target non-black creature, it can't be regenerated, or destroy target artifact. Very blue, black, and red. Radiate's a great card. I've never had room for it in another deck, so I tried it in this one just to see. Any kind of targeted removal means a board wipe. Any kind of targeted bounce spell can mean an upheaval. It's a very situational card. And the problem is you have to leave mana open for it, which can be difficult in a Planeswalker deck where you want to slam them on the table as soon as possible every time. But it is in there when I've got nothing else to do with my mana and it's just sitting around. Illusionist Gambit is great, especially in multiplayer. It only works as a fog in 1v1 if you ever get down to heads up in a game. So a fog for 4, not really that great at all. But in multiplayer, it can be really good. I've never been able to use this to blow someone out yet. I'm still waiting for the opportunity. Again, it also falls in the same vein as Radiate, keeping that mana open to go ahead and act and use it instead of dropping a Planeswalker and playing the Planeswalker. Capsize, because it's probably the best blue spell ever. I don't know. There's the Temporal Mastery. Just take the extra turn. Usually I will hit this off of Miracle, just naturally drawing it. I tend not to tutor for it that often, just because I don't see Mystical tutor that often. But it's in there. It's nice to take an extra turn and get the win in sometimes if I need it. So now we reach the mana portion of the deck. We want a lot of quick mana to dump our Planeswalkers early to try to get them down before our opponents get bigger threats down, which can deal with them easily. So we do have the Mana Crypt, Soul Ring, Mana Vault, Grim Monolith, Coalition Relic, Gilded Lotus, and then a couple of signets. We have the Izzet Signet, Dimir Signet, and the Rakdos Signet, all in colors there. Gem of Becoming can let me search for an island, swamp, or mountain. Doesn't have to be basics. I do have some of the duels in here, so that is good. 3 and 3, I mean, what happens when I play this card usually is I'll drop it down turn 4 or 5, probably activate it the next turn, and load up my hand with lands, and then slowly play those out. Unfortunately, blue, black, red, not that great for putting a bunch of lands into play, so these tend to clog up my hand when I do crack the gem. But getting the colors I need and the fixing I need is pretty good, especially in a deck that doesn't normally have that. Basics, 1 mountain, 2 swamps, and then 6 islands. We do have the duels in Volcanic Island, Underground Sea, Badlands, Rav duels, just steam vents, and Watery Grave. The 2 fetches I have are Polluted Delta and Bloodstained Mire. I especially like these because of the dragon in the art. You know, it's Nicol Bolas, and he's a dragon, so that's cool. We do have the filters as well. Cascade Bluffs, Sunken Ruins, Temple of Epiphany. The Scry is pretty nice on these, especially if I can get them down early, which I usually can. We have all three of the temples, so Epiphany, Temple of Deceit, and Temple of Malice. The check lands, Sulphur Falls, Drowned Catacomb, and Dragon Skull Summit. I probably need to cut the Tainted lands. I don't have a ton of swamps. I do have an Urborg in here, which you're about to see. And I do have the duels, so I do hit swamps that way, but sometimes I just need the basic lands, and early on the Tainteds don't really do that well for me. I do have Tainted Isle and Tainted Peak, but these might get cut here pretty soon. As far as lands I can tap for any color of mana for me, Command Tower, Reflecting Pool, Crumbling Necropolis, Crosis's Catacombs. I have Thespian Stage in here if I want to go ahead and copy a really good spell that my opponents have. And if it just, fixes my colors, that's great as well. If not, I also have Dark Depths, so Stage and Depths, of course, obviously, get a 20/20 Merit Legion to play, which is really the biggest creature my deck can make, even though it's a land that makes it and not an actual creature itself. I do have a man land in Lava Claw Reaches, Cabal Coffers, because sometimes stuff gets expensive, and Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth, Temples of False God, that gives me a little bit of a mana boost, and Reliquary Tower, because this deck can draw a lot of lands, a lot of cards, and especially if I hit a Blue Sun Zenith for a lot, I'm going to need something that's going to let me keep my hand stocked if I have like 15-20 cards in hand. So there you go. Thanks for watching CMDR Decks. Please subscribe and favorite.